First of all, I would like to
En primer lugar, quiero agradecerles a todos por la oportunidad de estar aquí y de compartir esta comunicación con ustedes. Gracias a todos los participantes, por supuesto, al comité científico y al organizador que nos permiten estar aquí compartiendo nuestras ideas y opiniones con respecto a un experimento que hicimos por primera vez en la carrera de psicología en la universidad. Esta presentación la preparé junto con mi colega Ricardo Peixoto, que también es profesor en la Universidad Católica en Praga, y el título es Aprendizaje Servicio en Psicología, el análisis de un experimento. Sabemos que se ha señalado la necesidad de adoptar nuevas estrategias para el aprendizaje de los alumnos. Tenemos una larga tradición de presentaciones, métodos expositivos y se presentaron muchas metodologías que permiten al cuerpo docente desarrollar habilidades y también la idea es ayudar a los alumnos a mejorar. El aprendizaje de servicio es una metodología que es cada vez más difundida dentro del marco de diferentes metodologías que, que tienen en cuenta los intereses de los profesores y los alumnos, pero también tienen en cuenta sus habilidades. El aprendizaje de servicio permite el desarrollo de habilidades horizontales cuando los alumnos y los profesores dan todo de sí mismos para servir a otros, en especial en ciertas áreas. En la literatura vemos varios estudios que muestran los beneficios de esta metodología de aprendizaje-servicio en las actitudes de los alumnos con respecto a las escuelas, al aprendizaje, en el compromiso cívico de los alumnos, pero también les da la oportunidad de desarrollar habilidades sociales e incluso de mejorar su desempeño académico. Hay otros estudios que nos permiten entender los beneficios en cuanto al conocimiento personal, el desarrollo cognitivo y moral también. Todo esto se ha publicado en la literatura y sabrán entonces que esto es una buena oportunidad para que los profesores, los alumnos y en realidad para el desarrollo de toda una cultura. En la psicología hay ciertas experiencias en la literatura basadas en el trabajo de Bringler, básicamente, algunas pautas, pero no hay mucha información, especialmente en nuestro contexto en Portugal. Entonces, en esta comunicación,
very briefly.
brevemente, vamos a compartir nuestra primera experiencia con el aprendizaje servicio en el curso de psicología, en el máster de psicología, en el contexto de un curso cuyo nombre es Educación y temas emergentes. Aquí estamos pensando el plan de estudios del curso, donde los alumnos participan en la evaluación de un tema que surge, un tema emergente, se ponen en contacto con diversas instituciones, principalmente educativas, escuelas, por ejemplo, pero también otras instituciones. Y en este proyecto se evalúan las necesidades, se desarrolla una estrategia y se implementa esta estrategia, todo esto como parte del curso. Se implementa el proyecto desarrollado en el curso. En estos proyectos los participantes eran estudiantes. Vamos a presentar los resultados de las perspectivas de los alumnos. En este curso participaron 10 alumnos, 2 que tenían estaban haciendo un máster en psicología educativa y en base a la participación de los alumnos preparamos un cuestionario en relación al impacto que tuvo esta experiencia sobre sus habilidades y destrezas. Este cuestionario fue desarrollado por colegas de la Facultad de Oporto, la Facultad de Psicología Educativa, y lo utilizamos al fin de este proceso para poder evaluar la experiencia. Considerando el análisis de los contenidos, llegamos a la conclusión de que los alumnos vieron este desarrollo de sus habilidades profesionales en primer lugar, también a nivel personal, el sentido de empatía, de comprensión, vieron que desarrollaron sus habilidades blandas, especialmente el tema de responsabilidad, autonomía, creatividad, relaciones interpersonales, y entendieron el efecto de esta experiencia sobre sus habilidades personales. Esta experiencia les permitió desarrollar no solamente las habilidades y estrategias profesionales, sino también pudieron desarrollar sus habilidades personales o blandas, como ya dije. Estos resultados están alineados con lo que esperábamos de alguna manera. Entonces, la evaluación de los alumnos fue muy positiva, considerando el contacto que tuvieron con la realidad, con las personas, con profesionales y, por supuesto, con la población objetivo. Percibieron también que esta experiencia fue muy positiva para ellos, para sus habilidades personales e interpersonales. Sin embargo, debemos considerar que esta experiencia no fue todo lo positiva que hubiera sido porque se realizó en el contexto de la pandemia de COVID. Entonces, en el texto que vamos a tratar de presentar, vamos a presentarnos
Logistical difficulties that we faced and how it might be overcome in future experiments. I thank you all for your attention and keep available for answering all the questions you would like. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paulo. We really appreciate your presentation. So, yes, it is noted that this specific study involved the psychology students in the context of Braga University, Catholic University, and that they indicated that it had a positive experience for them in terms of their personal and interpersonal skills as students, but that the difficulties of COVID did play a role, and the authors will pursue and report that in their publication moving forward. Thank you so much for that. As we are sort of trying to keep to time, I would like to introduce Anne-Catherine Lindau now from the Catholic University in Ingolstadt, Germany, to do her presentation for us. Thank you very much. Please, if you have questions, remember you can post them later on and we will moderate that at the end of the session. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for your introduction. I hope you can see my screen. So my name is Anne-Catherine. Yes, okay, thank you. My name is Anne-Catherine Lindau, and I'm a professor for geography education and education for sustainable development at the Catholic University in Eichstätt-Ingolstadt in the middle of Bavaria in Germany. And I would like to give a short input on teacher professionalization through service learning using the whole school approach as an example. I divide my input into the aspect of service learning and education for sustainable development, ESD, and service learning and whole school approach. From this, I derive a seminar concept for teacher education, and I end with a short conclusion. Tackling the climate crisis and promoting sustainable development and the sense of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, requires efforts by society as a whole. Universities also bear responsibility in this process. They can sustainability research solution, empower young people to shape a sustainable future and meet the requirements for sustainable development in their own processes at all levels. You can see our the roof of our university and with the EMA certification. So now the Catholic University in Eichstätt-Ingolstadt is a sustainable university. In order for higher education institutions to be able to meet these demands, new approaches and transformation paths are needed that particularly overcome the functional differential of science and society. Here you can see the 6 fields of action in the field sustainability: governance, research, teaching, transfer, students, initiative, and campus management. One approach to transformation is the concept of the service learning. It engages students in active, relevant, and collaborative learning processes and is characterized by an equal focus on the support service and the learning that take place learning. In teacher education, the service learning approach has particular potential because its impact intends into the school. Using the example for the service learning format, a concept from university teacher training is presented. Using the current topic of climate neutrality, student teachers develop a project-oriented learning environment for different types of schools as part of a seminar. A current goal of the whole school approach is to achieve climate neutrality, which in addition of the signification of the school, also an effect on the community. In addition to measure the adapt of climate change, waste are being sourced in the field of CO2 reduction to combine climate compatibility and prosperity. Climate neutrality is a central and interlinked issue that touch to different areas in social organizations and concerns technical, political, social, and natural science aspects of the present of the future. Closely linked that the questions of climate neutrality are also numerous other questions of the whole school approach. You can see it on the right side. Approach which can be differentiated into the field of action, governance, school, culture, teaching, and campus. You can see here the session topics of the seminar concept. It is first about the basics of ESD, then about the whole institution approach using the example of our university. This is followed by the transfer to the institution for school. The expertise of School for Earth from Greenpeace will be used for this. In the next session, the students plan the project for primary and secondary school students on topics of the whole school approach and on the climate neutrality. The project will then be implemented in the school and then we will evaluate this and assess at the university. So now my conclusion, the connection, between service learning and ESD is very diverse and promising due to the many topics and forms of teaching and learning. Science teachers' education is very far-reaching into schools. The service learning approach offers many potentials. The whole school approach and the climate neutrality will be the most important task of schools in the next years. The transfer from university to school is value, as universities have greater expertise than schools. At the same time, students, teachers are the future multiplicators of service learning and in ESD than in schools. So here are my reference, and thank you very much for your attention, and I am forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Catherine Lindau from Ingolstadt, Ingolstadt Catholic University for your presentation. So just to summarize, your service learning students worked with teachers in the whole school development, linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, and they emphasized particularly the fact that there is a link between understanding climate neutrality and how this is integrated into the whole service offering that is offered to the schools, and also evaluating that offering as you do service learning with schools and you train teachers for different types of schools. A wonderful contribution and a very important one to make sure that you actually contribute to the understanding of the science of sustainable development. Thank you very much for that. Our next speaker, I need to now announce, is Bernard Luverekera, and he's from the University of Kisubi in Uganda. Are you here, Bernard? You can, if you have a presentation, you're welcome to share that.
You.
Otherwise, just speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have my slides here.
Yes, we see them.
Yes, okay. That is our presentation, and I'm presenting on behalf of my other two colleagues. That is Margaret Sevunya and Kalama John Baptist. And we delved into an interesting topic, service learning in African higher education. And I wanted to see how it can be a way to achieve a spirituality for diligent service to humanity. Our major question was whether actually service learning is something that is common on the African continent in higher education. That was our major investigation, and perhaps what forms it takes. And we primarily conducted a literature review, a desktop research, to be able to identify the perspectives of education, the goals and objectives of education as a whole in the African context, and then also to try to assess the concept of spirituality in African higher education. And our major input here we found was a quotation from Kofi Annan, former Secretary General of the United Nations, and how he was anchoring the development of Africa in the 21st century in the kind of education that is provided on the continent. Generally speaking, the state and the goals of African education today, as we found them, were mainly that they were suffering the legacies of the colonial past in Africa, and they are concentrating on rote learning and the reproduction of knowledge, specifically for examination purposes, and that they are teacher-centered in terms of delivery, and that there is a huge divide between the theory and practical. And we also discovered that by and large, the methodology, the pedagogy of service learning is not yet very popular on the African continent. However, a lot of universities on the continent are trying to embrace that as an aspect of their community engagement, involvement. And then where it exists, it is neither institutionalized, and sometimes it is confused with the practical components of the curriculum, like internship. And then one of the major questions we wanted to answer is, why should service learning be introduced in African higher education? And we thought that it is important for promoting active learning to bridge the gap between theory and practice and service, and to relate the learning experiences of the learners to their existential needs and challenges of society, and facilitate reciprocal learning between the learners and the community where they live, and then to inculcate the critical life skills for the 21st century. And overall, so that we are able to achieve a whole person education approach. And then for the spirituality for service, we tried to internalize some of the issues that eventually ended up coming up yesterday, that this spirituality should be all embracing. It shouldn't be confessional, it shouldn't be denominational. It should be a spirituality that prepares these learners to be serviceable to all without any distinction, and one that promotes the inherent dignity of the human person, so that it is inclusive. And this is part of the other things that we identified in connection with the presentation of yesterday. We thought we were relevant here, but in the interest of time, I will not delve into those. And then we also tried to explore examples of Catholic spirituality of service learning, and we used 3 models. One of them is promoted by the Society of Jesus under the Ignatian pedagogical paradigm, and it is implemented in the Arupe College Apostolic Program in Zimbabwe, which is a philosophical institute for the Jesuits training. And this one basically creates an interplay that is continuous with context, experience, action, and evaluation. And it is built on immersion and voluntary work, which allows the learners to go into the community. And then the second model we explored is the one of the Salesian pedagogy, or the pedagogy of the Society of Francis de Sales. And we took particular interest in the symbol of the oratory as the base of the spirituality of the practical approach to learning that is famous with the Salesians, which basically is implemented through the Don Bosco Youth Network, and then the Don Bosco Technical and Vocational Education and Training Centers in Africa and Madagascar, whose major objective is obviously to skill the youth so that they are more sustainable in living. And then the third one is a model by the Brothers of Christian Instruction. It's a Menesian pedagogy. The brothers are the founders of the University of Kisuri, for which we are representing here. And this from the very start centered on whole person education, where education is a spirituality of its own kind, and it's more than simply a profession. And it is centered on the spirituality of the temple, so that through teaching, the teacher is actually working for salvation of themselves and the children. That ends. For the conclusion, Africa is to embrace service learning that is to the 21st century needs. And also we appreciated initiatives that are already being undertaken, for example, under the auspices of CLACE and Uniservitate, as one way of popularizing and supporting the institutionalization of learning. And also we argue that Catholic universities on the African continent need to articulate a spirituality to guide their service learning, so that they can build that link between the ordinary learning in class and then the deepening of the values that bind us all human beings. Very finally, that Catholic universities need to strengthen their collaborations with international counterparts that have already made a lot of progress and experience in service learning, so that service learning becomes more vibrant on the African continent. And here in mind, we have, for example, one of the big associations that is under the ASEC, which is in 10 countries in Africa. And it is working in collaboration with the Marywood University, among others, which is based in the United States, and it's doing a wonderful job. And then we also appreciated that service learning, especially among the Catholic universities, the surest way to heed Pope Francis' call to build a fairer and more inclusive and just and stable and united and more cohesive human family, because we believe that's what Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti basically are all about, and maybe other authorities from the Church's teaching. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate that presentation, Bernard, on behalf of the University of Kisumu in Uganda. It is a really interesting presentation in the sense that he did a desktop study on service learning in Africa, and that the findings were that there was still a lot of legacy from the colonial past in terms of the way higher education is conducted, but that there is a gap between how theory and practice is getting together and implemented, not only at Catholic universities, but universities generally in Africa. And therefore, it is important to introduce service learning in higher education for achieving not only the critical life skills with the students, but the reciprocity that is important to uplift the community. And then explored the spirituality aspect, linking to three models of religious approaches that can be found in the Catholic environment, but also emphasized that this is about whole person development and non-denominational and non-confessional, not necessarily only linked to Catholic universities, but that collaboration between international universities in all forms of service learning, especially in the Catholic environment, but beyond that, is really important. Thank you very much. Really nice presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so then, ladies and gentlemen, our next presenter is going to be Ana Maria Oliveira from the Universidade Católica Portuguesa Lisboa, so from Lisbon University in Portugal. Thank you very much. You are welcome to start.
Thank you.
We see your slides.
Muchísimas gracias. Yo voy a hablar en castellano y empiezo por...
I'm going to speak in Spanish. I am going to apologize, but the point is that the presentation is in Portuguese, so we are going to do our best in the short time we have. Good morning or good afternoon. Thank you very much. I am going to talk about the involvement of students in service learning. As we know, service learning has an element, a key element, which is the involvement and commitment of students throughout all the stages, from planning, assessment, implementation. So I want to analyze the concept or the effects of students of social work courses after working with service learning. We know from many trials and studies that the service learning experiences influence the shaping of the citizen values in students. It helps them to identify the problems in the society and create solutions. And this may bring about a feeling of social responsibility. So for this study, we took into account 3 dimensions. One is that education is considered as a comprehensive process. According to UNESCO report, where people learn to be, learn to live with, learn to do, and learn to learn. So the universities should allow students and should create challenges so that new generations of students may learn the necessary skills to live in a sustainable way in the personal, social, labor, and community environments. And as Tedesco was saying, quality education is education that meets the 2 pillars: learning to learn and learning to live in community with others. And all the others will just follow suit. So schools and universities have to create this venue where we share, identify problems, and structure values and knowledge. The second dimension is citizenship as a process that involves an active exercise by citizens. So this happens when people develop an active feeling of belonging to a community, and this encourages their active involvement in the public arena. And the most important elements for this to come true, one of the most important elements is involvement, commitment, engagement, which is the third dimension. Engagement is the social and collective action that creates commitment and therefore a shared responsibility that makes it possible to participate in decisions, creates opportunities for development of skills, and creates a sense of identity in a community. We believe that involvement and participation is a way for young people to become actors. That is, it is a creative, constructive development of students that contribute to solve community actual problems. So the right venues and scenarios are created so that students may participate in activities that are geared towards the communities. This is based on relationships which are horizontal and which are fostered by a discussion among parties that are on equal footing. So this is a good practice, but it also involves the development of a process during which students have the right to intervene and express their opinions on everything that affects their lives. The methodology we used was the following one. It uses an exploratory approach because we looked at a small group of students, 30 students in the social work course, and early on we wanted to carry out a listening experience. We told them about the methodology, and after the whole process, a survey was going to distribute it to all the students in the university. We wanted to do an exploratory analysis so that we could later on expand this to all the students to understand the advantages and the benefits of being involved in service learning projects. At the end of the project, we carry out a group interview taking into account 3 dimensions: the functional, personal, and social advantages of participation or involvement. The results and the discussion enabled us we worked on 4 levels. 1, we analyzed the effects on the personal development, on the social development, on the professional development arena, and finally we analyzed the mechanisms that facilitated the whole process, but also the ones that may have hindered the whole process. So we discovered the following. the effects on the personal development were considered a possibility of growth, personal growth and development through the development of skills related to self-esteem, self-management, being proactive, and being creative. So personal development was related to this youth protagonism. As Santos suggests, it is a source of commitment which fosters the skills of students. It helps them to learn about themselves, to get to know themselves. So this improves their self-esteem, and they are better able to value their power as human beings and as agents of change for their own lives. When talking about the social development effects, we have this image where we can see the 4 pillars of learning. The students stressed participation and engagement as a mechanism to develop the feeling of belonging to a community. So the whole process has involved leaving their comfort zone to understand the needs of the others, of the third parties. Therefore, their actions, which used to be based on their personal interests, are now focused on the community interests. So students realize that they understand the problems surrounding them, and the social issues become part of their everyday scenarios. Now they have become aware and they get involved in the collective well-being. Regarding professional development, when we analyzed the responses to the survey, we were able to identify that participation throughout the process brings about motivation for learning. First, related to the curriculum contents. Students were better prepared for the labor market, to join the labor market, and they underlined this as being quite important. Talking about the facilitating mechanism, students stressed supervision and sharing among peers in a process of reflection. And here I would like to stress this feeling of reflection, which all studies say is key in service learning experiences, but which is also key for participation to be effective. Participation and engagement. So throughout the process, students were able to think, relive the experiences, but also expand their knowledge. The limiting factors were time management. Students say it's difficult to organize their personal work, the work with the community, and the academic work, but they feel that they have the support of the institutions. And finally, engagement that has been experienced has a multiplying effect in all dimensions and increases social commitment and citizenship feelings and commitment. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ana Oliveira. We really appreciate your presentation. So this presentation, just to quickly capture, worked with social work students, and they looked at the various dimensions of education, which was not just learning to be and learning to learn, but learning to live, and they wanted to see the application in all environments. They were very interested in seeing how the citizenship and the process of engagement led to a commitment in working within the community, and how it created a sense of responsibility amongst the students. And they did some exploratory analyses of the students through the various interviews, looking at the functional, the personal, and the social effects. Sorry, my microphone was up. But in any case, I'll continue. So there was a sense of development from the students, but there was also a sense of ownership in terms of the social issues and realities in their communities, and the reflection part of the service learning contributed a lot to the personal growth of the students. That's just a short summary. Sorry, I didn't put down my microphone for that. Apologies if you couldn't hear me well. Thank you very much for your presentation. The next presenter is going to be Sophia Silva from the Pontific University, Catholic University in Chile, and she is going to speak to us. Thank you, Sophia. Away you go. Bye.
¿Se escucha bien?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. I am Sophia Silva. I am a social worker. I'm part of the service learning team of Universidad Católica de Chile. I'll try not to speak so fast because we Chileans are said to speak too quickly. So in order to facilitate translation, I'll try to go slower. I'm going to talk about the paper we wrote together with Manuel Caire, who is also a social worker, who is part of the Catholic University in Chile. New perspectives. But first of all, I'd like to talk about the context, how we got to make this diagnosis, whose goal is to know the level of implementation of interdiscipline in our university. That is service learning and interdiscipline, building new perspectives. We were in the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was very difficult not to see something that we had been reading in the literature. The social challenges globally were not responding to a unidimensional reality only, but there is also complexity there, as a result of which we are forced to focus on this as inseparable complexes. That is, we're talking about the high magnitude reality that is multidimensional, requires a wider approach. But while this happens, and while we are living through a pandemic, sometimes we separate lives into different aspects, the way of seeing life, learning, teaching, training professionals, understanding social challenges. So taking this as a starting point, the service learning program I'm talking about has been implemented for over 15 years in our university. And at some point in time in the history, it happened that we said it is necessary to think of coordinating courses, but how can that coordination take place? What should we do? And this was also a starting point where we started to wonder whether service learning can only be applied to learning exclusively as an individual process. We thought it should be a wider process aiming to common good. So service learning applies to applying the most pertinent and relevant knowledge beyond the classrooms. And very frequently, this requires knowledge of several disciplines, and it also requires looking at the reality and providing an answer to social challenges in a comprehensive manner. So considering all these aspects, the concept of multidimensionality, intersectorality, and multi-causal phenomena, which are not concepts foreign to service learning. Quite the contrary, they are key for social transformation, and these concepts are also acknowledged by the interdiscipline. So it's not only a coexistence among different disciplines, but also a dialogue and exchange of knowledge, measures, and analysis so as to face and try to approach social challenges. So we thought about all of this, and when we were developing the service learning program for 2022-2023, we decided to include interdiscipline as one of the aspects. The goal is to favor the implementation of service learning approach in an interdisciplinary manner. That was the starting point. One of the first actions was to build a definition for the program, a definition of interdiscipline. What is interdiscipline and what is interdisciplinary service learning? I'm going to read this, and I'm also going to leave this information on the chat so that you can reread it later. So our definition is following. Interdisciplinary service learning is an integration of perspectives, information, data, technical tools, concepts, and theories among different disciplines that not only collects knowledge of different disciplines, but also synthesizes them through interaction, dialogue, cooperation, to understand world in a more comprehensive manner. Interdisciplinary learning is a service learning approach where people work collaboratively to build new knowledge based on their knowledge and experiences, integrating methods, approaches, and knowledge from different disciplines. Then, after we decided, or we came to an agreement on this definition so as to have the same starting point, we decided to make this diagnosis. And I'll talk about this more concretely now. We want to know the level of implementation of interdiscipline in service learning projects in Chilean Catholic University. We focus on 3 moments, which are not necessarily linear. Some stages happened simultaneously. On the one hand, we're trying to review the literature on service learning, interdiscipline at the national and international level, as well as systematization of experiences of interdisciplinary service learning in our university. On the other hand, we also created a focal group with the participation of teachers from our university who participated in interdisciplinary courses, who applied service learning methodology in their courses, and the selected courses had to meet 3 criteria. One of the 3 criteria, one, they had to be courses made up of students from different disciplines. They had to be courses designed or taught by teachers from different disciplines, or finally, they should be carrying out a collaborative approach. And in this focal group, the general topic was interdiscipline and service learning, teaching. Finally, we organized a meeting with the Café Mundial methodology, and the goal is to generate collaborative dialogue to promote thinking among participants. And one of the main findings of this diagnosis was that, on the one hand, there is a small scientific production of interdisciplinary service learning works. There are very few examples, and they're usually not focused on service learning, and they're especially for graduate and not undergraduate courses. The second finding from an institutional point of view is that, first of all, there is a low coordination of service learning with an interdisciplinary approach. And this is mainly due to institutional factors, as well as factors related to the same service learning program of our university. And this is something that many teachers we worked with said. There is no political willingness to do real work among different disciplines. In general terms, what we see is that collaborative work is difficult, slow, and very frequently very expensive. So these 3 things are quite complex, and it makes things much more difficult. On the other hand, teachers are not trained to leverage service learning in an interdisciplinary manner. And usually, we do not see social or community challenges that are being approached through service learning and that promote these kind of challenges. Finally, we also had service learning instruments, and we thought we should think of different opportunities to promote this thinking. In order to conclude, I'd like to say that interdiscipline may be understood as an achievement that goes beyond professions and a means to build a fairer and more human society, a society that is focused on human dignity. And finally, we shouldn't forget that the focus of service learning is responding to the challenges we see in our context with different dynamics. They respond to a complex reality. Consequently, as we saw in the results of our study, we need to continue with this work at an institutional level and take advantage of the same inputs and partnerships among communities. And in order to really conclude, we realize that it is unavoidable and necessary to question the way in which we approach service learning. Interdiscipline is a methodology that contributes to the development of committed people, and the goal is to approach social education from our curricula. And this should not only stay in the discourse, we have to work towards the transformation of higher education, rethinking and considering the underlying patriarchal and bureaucratic structures in our universities, in units, and in the same teachers implementing this methodology. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophia. I didn't want to stop your sentence because I know you're saying some important stuff for us here. So that's why you had a couple of seconds leverage. Sophia's presentation has brought us some new service learning perspectives in the social challenges, not in a silo approach, which we normally find at universities. We see that we need to realize that we need a comprehensive and multi-dimensional and multidisciplinary approaches for the complex challenges that our communities face, and therefore the university actually planned and built on the 15-year experiences to design first a definition for what they meant with interdisciplinary working together on a project. They collected the data, they looked at the tools and the theories from the various disciplines and how that could interact in order to find a collective dialogue that could build to new knowledge, working together. And they identified various stages in this process, but in conclusion, they found that there was a low production of works on service learning in the interdisciplinary space, and the reason for this is mostly because of a variety of factors. One of the most important one is the political will to get out of your comfort zone and work with other disciplines. Trying to work interdisciplinary is not always supported through the structures in universities, and these challenges and approaches will need new instruments in order to move forward and actually grow the whole process of becoming a fairer and more humane society, because working in a singular discipline will not solve all the problems. Thank you very much, Sophia. Sophie, sorry. my mistake. Okay, so after Sophie, we have Nandi Sumaya that's going to speak to us. She is speaking to us from the Lady Duak College in India. Thank you very much. You can go ahead, Nandini, sorry.
So I guess my screen is visible.
Yes, we see your slides, but you have to speak a little bit louder if you don't mind.
Okay, so greetings, and I'm audible now, right? Is it audible?
Well audible.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm Soumya Nandini, and unfortunately one of my co-speakers, she's not here, so I'm going to proceed presenting. So this is the research paper that we worked on, understanding the impact of Life Frontier Engagement Program on college students' learning outcomes through e-service learning. So basically, our college insists on this Life Frontier Engagement, which is a service learning program. We all know how service learning is very important, and it is an educational approach that combines learning objectives with the community engagement, and also provides a pragmatic, progressive experience while meeting all the social needs. Life Frontier Engagement is one such service learning program, which is actually experiential learning program, which also involves community engagement. It also provides, it is compulsory for all the final year students of our college, and hence this study mainly focused on how this Life Frontier Engagement program impacted the lives of alumni. We did this service learning program in the online mode. So e-service learning is very important because it also provides an antidote for tremendous engagement in online courses. There are four types of service, there are three types of e-service learning. The first method being online instructions, that is academic instruction, and offline on-site service learning. The second thing being offline instructions and online service learning. And there is an extreme e-service learning where both on-site community engagement as well as the academic instructions are given online. So we were engaged in the third type of e-service learning. So these are our objectives. So to analyze the effectiveness of LFE, in our college, we call Life Frontier Engagement for short as LFE. So this Life Frontier Engagement activities to analyze its effectiveness on the intellectual, spiritual, and ethical growth of students. So this is what we call as wholesome education. Then to highlight the significance of the community experiential learning to respond to socio-economic reality, and also the impact of the theme Women and Health. For each department, they have their own themes for this program. I belong to zoology department, and this zoology department had the theme Women and Health for 5 years. And to analyze the impact of that theme on the alumni, we had this study. These are the methodology we used. So our target group was the 5 batches of alumni who worked with LFE on the theme Women and Health, and our sample size was roughly around 65. We first gave a common questionnaire to assess the impact of this program, and those consisted of general questions. We contacted our alumni through social media platforms and through their email IDs. We also had a secondary specific women's health questionnaire to assess their quality of life and to assess their qualitative and quantitative well-being, which we'll see shortly. So these are our results. So there were many criteria that assessed how this LFE worked on the alumni. These are the major criteria that we were able to highlight. So peer relationship, independent learning, social awareness, essential life skills, occupational skills, and career interest. So these are the major fields of impact the alumni had, because peer relationship is what one must have. Team spirit and team coordination is what a person in today's life must have. Independent learning is not just being solitude, but it is about self-sustainability and to learn independently. Then social awareness, so which is much needed among the younger generation of today's world. And our major impact of this study was the gaining of essential life skills. So this LFE program helped alumni gain many essential life skills that were important for the betterment of their life. So these are the impacts of the health impacts from the Women's Health Questionnaire, and these were the criteria we used to assess their qualitative well-being. We saw an increase from pre-LFE program to post-LFE program in their awareness as well as in their health and as well as in their lifestyle. So the first like healthcare, so the alumni were about 35% were carrying their health before this LFE program, and post LFE program about 52% had healthcare. So similarly, the major impact, lifestyle plays a major role when it comes to health and sleep wakefulness pattern. About 38% of the alumni were aware even before LFE, but 60% became aware of how sleep wakefulness pattern is also equally important for the better health and better running of life. So stress management is what we come across in students in the present world, and about 70% have become aware of it and have also been able to manage their stress levels post this LFE program. So yeah, and the quantitative health being, so quantitative health measures, that is the measurable parameters of health, we also assess that, and about 50% of the alumni had normal levels, parameters. The others had slightly abnormal levels, but they were able to find remedies for all that. Not just this, every alumni worked, not just worked for the community, but they worked with the community. So they had a very good learning from this experience, because they did not learn just in class, but they also went to the community and taught the community people. So it is a double benefit for the community as well as the alumni. So they have, to summarize, they have all had an overall development, and they have built up confidence, competence, and compassion. This program has led to whole person development, as we saw, spiritually, intellectually, and ethically. So it is not just important to develop intellectually, but also to engage in a community, to get along with them, accept them as an integral part of us, and to learn from them also, not just us giving them an experience. So this leads to spiritual knowledge, and they also become socially responsible. This civic engagement also gives us a sack of many life skills. A few are mentioned here, like proper communication skills, scheduling, leadership qualities. All these are very essential for a person's success in today's world. And also based on this theme, after this program, they have become highly health conscious. And not just these alumni have become health conscious, they have also ensured that they are still in touch with the community, and this is a benefit for the community also. So for conclusion, service learning encompasses a holistic and wholesome education, integrating our head, hands, and heart. So it is also evident from this study that alumni not just gained knowledge, but they also applied it to the community, so that it was a benefit, it was a double benefit. Then LFE has also, not just LFE, but service learning always helps us to think critically and to help us volunteer. It is also, it must be made mandatory for higher education, because it develops highly potential individuals. So for a concluding statement, I would like to say, Mahatma Gandhi of India, as he rightly said, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself to service. Thereby, he emphasized the fact that service learning is essential, and it must be made mandatory in higher education, so that students gain a lot, and not just students, the faculty and the community also gain by this. So thank you.
Beatrice, Bibi, I believe you are muted.
Bibi, you are muted. Please turn on the microphone. No te escuchamos, Vivi.
Okay, my mouse was not playing along. Sorry, that's my mistake here. Sumaya, thank you very much for your presentation. We really appreciate your reflections on the LIFE project that you have implemented from zoology at your university with a focus on women's health, and the study that you did with the alumni, specifically in the circumstances during COVID, doing online surveys and working with women that you've worked with before, that have done some experiential learning as well as moved on to careers and have interacted with their communities. And the findings was very interesting in the sense that you found that the women's health choices have improved over the years, pre and post the interactions with the communities, and they have continued these relationships with their communities, and they've also learned from the community and have grown spiritually with the community, not only their own personal leadership qualities, but also qualities within the community. Thank you so much for that. So our next speaker then is going to be Martinez Uderia from the Universitat Sant Jorge in Spain. Thank you very much for that. Please go ahead.
Buenas tardes, good morning to everyone. My name is Arantzazu. Mi nombre es Arantzazu Martínez. Me acompaña la profesora Isabel Gómez.
I am Arantzazu Martínez. Professor Gomez is here with me, and I'm going to share our presentation.
¿Podrían confirmar que se ve correctamente?
Can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes,
Great.
we can.
Good morning. We're going to talk about the collaborative work carried out by Professor Isabel Gómez Villalba and myself as professors at Universidad San Jorge from Zaragoza, and Professor Ernesto Brotons has also provided support. He's from the Regional Center for Theological Studies from Aragon. This is called Educational Support and Development of Service Learning Projects. As professors, we believe that supporting students doing service learning projects is key to ensure the efficacy of these projects in the development of alumni and students. Let's see some introductory concepts for you to understand our proposal. First of all, as teachers and professors in higher education institutions, we want to contribute to a real educational revolution, such as the one proposed by our Pope, that contributes to a solidarity, fraternal humanism that we want for our countries, our regions. And we understand that education and research at the university, especially in Catholic and higher education universities, are a privileged space because they contribute to that personal and community conversion that we want for our students and for our teachers. What we look for in our universities is to achieve the person's comprehensive development. We want to educate citizens who work for the common good. We feel that this is what we have to do as university professors. We also understand that education is an essentially relational work. Education focused on the meeting, on encounters and for encounters, and this opens us up to people, and from there to ourselves and to other people. This is why we see this is an essentially relational work. It's a very special approach that we carry out in Catholic universities. We also understand that this mission, this call, makes service learning a resource with a high pedagogical, educational potential because it helps us to achieve transformation. It's a call to transform our environment, and we do this in order to achieve this horizon that we look for as university professors. We've already talked about this educational revolution, and we want to promote people's wholesome development. We want also to build a better relationship with our students, and service learning helps us to see that educational support is a facilitating tool to achieve this social and personal transformation that we want to achieve through service learning. And through our project, we humbly intend to propose an educational itinerary to train humankind, to educate humankind. We want professors working in our university and who support service learning processes should find here a tool that will help them in this call for students' education. What is a methodology? It is a qualitative methodology. We also did a literature review of the most relevant literature. On the one hand, we focused on the mission of higher education institutions and their support. We've also approached spiritual intelligence and how we think that service learning approaches are a way to develop spiritual intelligence. Finally, we saw that service learning in that literature review we did is a powerful element to work on spiritual intelligence on this wholesome education approach. In this first part, we also assessed the contribution of the church's teaching, and these pillars are perfectly aligned with the church's teachings. And now, as a result of this macro review and going to a practical level now, within the university educational context, we propose an educational itinerary to train humankind. It is based on 3 phases. The 3 classical phases of personalization of Teilhard de Chardin, the process of spiritual intelligence nurturance by Frances Torralba, and the thinking activities for development. Those 3 sources were analyzed, and in this way, we came to a support itinerary that includes those 3 sources we analyzed, and the goal is to favor a process from students' interiority towards a fraternal encounter with others. This is the way in which we see education. Education means meeting others and consequently meeting transcendence. In this proposal of educational itinerary, we relate the different phases, processes, instruments. And now I'd like to describe this itinerary that we suggest for spiritual support and cooperation. These are the different phases, tools, and we will see them separately for you to understand what our proposal is about. This is our first part, and Professor Isabel Gomez Villalba will describe this and share this information with us. Thank you very much. What we see on the screen, well, here we see this first phase that is focusing on oneself. This is a process where students are trained to be able to focus on their inner selves, to get in touch with themselves, to create this itinerary, this personal itinerary based on 3 processes: enjoying solitude, enjoying meeting with oneself, the imposed aspects are different from voluntary aspects. The second process is silent contemplation. Silence is a tool, a strategy that is very important in the implementation of reflexive and thinking processes. And the third process is having the capacity to ask questions. As a result of that silence, thinking silence, you can ask questions. Only those who look at the world around them are able to ask questions, meaningful questions. So in these instruments, these thinking instruments, we arrived to the conclusions that you can see on the left. On the second phase, this phase is about decentralizing, that is focusing on others, the joy of love. In the first phase, we achieve that internal connection, and out of that personal depth, we should be able to connect with others and with reality. And in this way, we generate a renewed relational awareness, a new awareness of others. And there are two processes here. Process 4, opening up to others through dialogue, and living human frailty. Service learning are extraordinary opportunities to get in touch with this experience of human frailty. We see situations where we have to think about this. The time to go through these processes are throughout all the phases, throughout all the stages of service learning, and the thinking instruments would be group discussions, multimedia presentations, meetings with the communities, all these creative activities where we can, in a way, learn to defocus or to open up to others. Finally, in our third phase, we focus on over-focusing. That is, in the previous phase, we opened up to others, and this facilitates opening up to transcendence. Only once I open up to others, I let God get into my life. And this is the joy of believing, the joy of that religious experience. And here we would have process number 6, which is meditation inspired in holy text and holy confessional text, but the learnings that transmit religious experiences that we are aware of. When? Well, throughout the whole project, and the different instruments we could use are theoretical thinking, monographies, case studies, or creative activities. And I will give the floor back to my colleague now. In order to conclude, we understand that the implication in the service learning projects are that they help us carry out service learning and meet service learning objectives, and it can also become a good tool to develop the spiritual dimension of students. We also understand that this process is not necessarily happening naturally. It may require educational support, and this is why the role of teachers and the systematization of that support process is key. Where does this teacher support come from? Well, it should come from calling and mission that is individual, that should be nurtured by the teachers and professors. It should also be focused on students' wholesome education. It should also support the social and personal transformation process, because as we said at the beginning, education is a relationship between students, teachers, and the environment. And we also understand that teachers' role is key because professors become facilitators of the opening to others in capital letters. Very briefly, the educational support itinerary is a guideline that may be adjusted to other realities and educational contexts. It is a guideline to nurture spiritual intelligence that is based on different phases, processes, and tools that leverage the relationship of encounter, meeting with others, the communities, and oneself. Thank you. very much for your attention and for having given us the opportunity to share these thoughts with you. We hope
Thank you.
this will be helpful to you.
Thank you, Arantzazu and Isabel. I think this is exactly what this session is about. And it's about the comprehensive education approach, where the mission of the university in creating whole students actually brings in the spiritual intelligence approach, where you actually start with the individual and the learning of the individual and the knowledge of the individual, working through all those various phases where the students not only know themselves, but they actually get the spiritual support phase, where they, once they've gone through the process of solitude and meditation, that they start to focus with relationships externally and the realities of those external relationships, and how frail they can be, and how they then have to move beyond that into the transcendent phase to actually acknowledge the link to the joy of the holy texts, and how that actually can contribute to change in the individual, the student, as well as in society. We're really thankful for that. We really appreciate that. So our next speakers is this now number 7. Number 8 is Isabel Gomez. And will you please go ahead and do your presentation? Thank you very much.
Soy Isabel Gómez.
Well, I'm Isabel Gomez, and I participated in Arantzazu Martinez's presentation. We shared it, actually. Miss Bowman, you are muted. We cannot hear you.
No. My mouse is giving me problems. Sorry. So our next presentation will be then by Dr. Juan Antonio Munizaga. Please go ahead, Doctor.
Thank you very. Do you hear me? ¿Me escuchan?
Yes, we hear you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the committee for having invited me to participate in this session to share with you my presentation. I'm going to describe, I'm going to talk about the laboratory community co-creating sustainable neighborhoods through service learning. This is a paper written by me together with Margaret Cleveland and Andres Baglioni. I work in the Environment and Risk Prevention and Engineering course in the Catholic University of the North. I am going to talk about the project Community Laboratory and about the implementation of the methodology Learning Plus Service in the Environment and Risk Prevention and Engineering course. We are applying this methodology in the waste characterization course, where students work with the surrounding communities. To give you the context of the current scenario, one of the strategies to reduce global warming and limiting the increase in temperatures is reducing methane emissions caused by human beings. So the wastewaters and waste in general represent 20% of emissions. In Chile, the limited recycling activities, it's only 1%, so a lot of waste is going to controlled and uncontrolled places, And in other kind of places, 7.6% of the total municipal waste generated in the country. Despite the global and local effort, we can see the effects of climate change, especially in Chile. Climate change has changed rainfall patterns, so there is water scarcity for human consumption and for irrigation. This affects the population, the productivity, and the health of the ecosystems. There is a loss of biodiversity, and it also affects food security. We can see in some articles published in the last few years where there is a warnings have been issued. The deserts are moving towards the central area of the country, and in our region we can see this in certain villages. For example, in Monte Patria, we can see the first climate expats in the country. This shows that it's necessary for universities to research these phenomena, the causes and effects, but they should also become leaders in the generation of projects for the mitigation and for adaptation to climate change, as well as disruptive projects for open and collaborative participation based on the innovation model of the 5 helixes. This model is based on 5 pillars, subsystems: the academia, higher education, local government, civil societies, private companies, and the natural environment. All these actors exchange knowledge in order to promote sustainable development for society. In this context, I would like to share with you this laboratory community, which is a cooperative project of citizen sciences and social innovation, which tries to educate, transform, and create sustainable neighbors. It also wants to have an impact on climate change, and it promotes sustainable development of the neighborhoods based on the SDGs from a local and global point of view. So using this innovation model, we can see the following actors: the academia, the UCN, Coquimbo University, the local government, the civil society made up by citizen councils, private companies, in this case it was COPEC, and the environment, that is what is around us. The project strengthens the relationship among these 5 actors, and therefore it's possible to tackle climate change through social and environmental education to the community. The people in the area are trained on responsible consumption and economy in the household. They are taught on waste. They are taught about waste management, recycling, composting, etc. This aims at improving the quality of life of the citizens or neighbors involved. I would like to share the map with you now. This is the districts where these experiences were carried out. Laboratory community was launched in 2018, and this program was carried on in 2019 too, but when the pandemic was broke out, we had to interrupt it. These are the districts where this project was carried out. This is where we have the university campus close to the communities we were working with. And in order to give you a description of the districts we were working with, we took a sample of households, 23 households in San Juan and 50 in Guayacán. 18 participated in the first one and 36 in the second one. We have a 3.7 ratio between inhabitants per household. These are social economic groups that are vulnerable and that have limited resources. 61% were in this category in the first districts, and 55% were in this category. In the second district, the methodology we used was the following one, and it includes learning plus service. Students and myself got in touch with citizen councils where we held meetings with key actors such as the municipal governments and private companies in order to learn about the households that were going to be involved. And at these meetings, we defined, again, the households that were going to be involved, and the students would later on survey the information, gather information. This information gathering was done using a survey to assess the perception regarding consumption and recycling. The socioeconomic level was also assessed, and water and power consumption were also recorded, as well as waste, the waste composition. After that, we assessed the production of waste and water and power consumption. The results were analyzed and were shared with the citizens that were participating, and later on they were offered good environmental practices workshops. These are the various activities we carried out with the participating citizens in 2018 and 2019. And this waste characterization subject at the course of environment and risk prevention engineering course. So we analyze the production and characterization of waste. The course has practical and theoretical components, and we apply the service learning methodology to here we can see students separating waste, and some of the results of the diagnosis. Well, we can see how much could be recycled, 82, 83%, but currently all this waste goes to landfills. These are some results of the environmental metrics. This is the per capita production of waste.
Sorry, the time is
conclusions. Conclusions are the following one. We can see that this methodology, learning plus service, can be applied in these two cases. And by using active laboratories, researchers and students become part of the community and they become social innovators. Synergies are created. The methodology takes into account the needs of the society and the challenges faced by local and global communities. The goals, some goals are set for households in relation to waste management and water and power consumption per capita. And finally, we were able to show there is a high possibility of recycling waste, but waste is not properly recycled because of the lack of a waste management program and education. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you very, very much. Very interesting and different slant on this presentation. Illustrating a community laboratory with a 5-helix partnership between civil society, local government, citizen scientists, the universities, and the environment, and the effects of environmental waste, and the effects obviously on climate change that is experienced by various communities. The data was collected, analyzed, and also plans were made in participation with the community partners in order to create this collaborative laboratory, a very nice example of how you can work and make plans in a community. Unfortunately, I think we cut you short, but the importance is that you did apply service learning in your process and that your students here actually came up with some new innovative ideas with their community partners. Thank you very much. Sorry that I had to cut you there. but it was an excellent presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've come to the end of our session now, and we want to now find out what kind of questions you asked for our presenters. So, Alessandra, have you picked up some questions that you would like to pose to any of the particular speakers? I will also ask questions if necessary.
Aquí Martin
Luke has asked a question about the relationship between service learning and concrete exercise or practice, how knowledge and skills and practices may be acquired, and how you manage this relationship. I don't know if any member of the panel would like to answer this. It's a question addressed to everybody who would like to take the floor.
You can raise your hand. Okay, alumno. Who's raising a hand there? Aransu? Don't you have some ideas? Thank you, Bernard. Please go ahead, answer the question to get the conversation started. So we want to know the relationship between service learning and internship and how you differentiate between these experiences.
Sí. Bueno, pues,
Thank you very much. And because Martin is my colleague, so I had attempted to answer in the chat, but maybe for the benefit of everyone, I can share my reflections to everyone. My internalization of what service learning would mean to me today, I think each time that I'm participating in these events, is I'm beginning to see service learning as some activity that goes beyond the formal classroom in the technical sense, because internship is going to be the activity that is really restricted in terms of time and in terms of goals, in terms of objectives. It is embedded in the curriculum, and it is contributing towards the final grade of the student. And well, it is true that it is giving a certain level of community experience to this candidate, but it is so structured to the point that perhaps it has limitations to fit as a service learning experience. My understanding of service learning today is that I have learned this knowledge, and I process the knowledge, and I own the knowledge, and I expand it to go beyond the classroom environment. And it is beyond the rubrics that are tailored for service learning, for the internship, I beg your pardon. And then I innovate something out of that for the benefit of the community. I like very much already the experiences we have had here, the one from the participant from Chile, the community laboratory. I think that's one is a wonderful example of what community service learning would be for me. And also the lady from India, the Life Project, I find those extremely wonderful. So, but how do you integrate all? Is there an intersection between the two? Yes, there is, definitely up to a certain point. But I think one is smaller than the other, and that is internship. Thank you. Just to make an attempt.
Thank you for that. I think some of you can also comment. Isabel, you and your team could probably also contribute here, because it's also about the spiritual effects. From our experience in South Africa, we see that when students do professional experiential learning, they get prescribed things that they have to do in the workplace. But it doesn't go beyond that spiritual growth or that that development, that individual development necessarily. And I think that is what Bernard has alluded to. So there is a differentiation, and the two do support one another because, you know, leadership, collaboration, planning, all of those elements are part of service learning. But the personal development and the reflective learning, I think, is the key thing that makes it different. Do you want to comment on that?
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. It's really about thinking on our actions, but thinking processes have different depth levels. We want to get into those depth levels through those reflexive processes, and we have to support students to achieve that vital breathing that implies going inside yourself and going out of yourself to educate for donation. The goal being to achieve transcendence. It is opening up to others, but opening up so that through others, we will achieve transcendence. So service learning projects, we believe, are also great opportunities to achieve that person's wholesome growth, so that we will not only discover our interior resources, but use those resources for the service of others. It's a person who can donate what they have inside themselves. And thanks to that, we can improve our surrounding reality. And this makes us happy. That experience, being aware of that experience, means a real spiritual growth. Thank you. We also believe that learning service projects help students to get closer to vulnerable realities. So we need students to have a more comprehensive view, to respond to the environment, to other people's needs, so that the needs of people surrounding them will really awaken in them the desire to help. And our interaction with people help towards our own transformation. So as teachers who want to support students through that process, that we understand what vulnerability is, what we do in the light of vulnerability, and we have to take advantage of the different projects to generate that opening up to our environment, to other people's needs.
I see there's another question for Joan Antonio.
Beatrice, may I add something?
Yes, please.
Beatrice?
Go ahead. Yes. Add?
May I add something? Well,
sure.
From the community laboratory point of view, through this 2-year-long experience, we have seen that students touching waste themselves become aware of the global problem we face, as well as the social reality. Once they get in touch with waste, they become aware of all this. Our students have really been able to think about this, and I think it is extremely important. If we were able to implement laboratory communities in your universities or in many other parts, people would understand firsthand what the problem is about. We also provide to neighbors workshops on good environmental practices, and they attend those workshops together with students. I don't know whether this is a solution to the reality we're facing, but it may contribute a little bit to improve our current situation in terms of our relationship between ourselves, the environment, and the society.
Thank you.
There is another question for Juan Antonio here.
Yeah, I see.
Alejandra, sure, go ahead. It's a very good question. Well, there are 2 questions for Juan Antonio. Apparently, his presentation has been very encouraging. How do you manage the balance of the different players participating in your project? Sometimes municipalities or universities are more powerful and they have a greater impact on opinions regarding a certain topic. So how do you manage that balance so that the relationships will be fairer? Okay, we set letters of commitment among the different players participating in the project, considering that they may promise and commit their support, but once you get to the real practice, that support may not show up. But our results have been quite successful, and students are part of a course. That is, they're not forced to do this, but they have to do this as part of a course and as a voluntary activity too. They attend the presentations, the meetings with neighbors, activities to sort waste. You don't have to put up a sign and force them to do this. And there was another question. The other question is about the sustainability of the project. How do you ensure sustainability of the project beyond the service learning program? That is, how can the community support this project? One of the most important thing is empowering people, empowering students, neighbors. The information we got through our project, well, the results of this project may contribute to different actions. For example, submitting requests to participate in other projects for the collection of home waste, for example, or waste sorting at the origin, at the source of waste. And the question was also about project sustainability, right? Well, we started with zero budget. No money. We tried to get support from the municipality. We started in 2018. We tried to convince the authorities about the importance of this project. And then we had a private company join our project. And through corporate social responsibility program, they donate scales, overalls, personal protection equipment for students, as you were able to see on the pictures. All students are well protected. Unfortunately, we've had to stop this because of COVID, but they might be able to do this with this personal protection equipment. So we got equipment, resources to be able to continue with our project next year. Great. Rocio here on the chat says that the letter of commitment is a very important tool for learning service projects because they include guidelines, define expectations both for students, teachers, and community partners. I've read this comment aloud so that it can be translated into English.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alejandra. There are no further questions in the chat. There are no further questions.
What I wanted to say is I really want to commend and thank every presenter. Every contribution to the session had a different angle and a collective input that can take us forward in the research of service learning and the way we actually bring this whole person development into the spiritual development of students and staff, and I think also change communities. And I think with that said, I want to just remind you that you will be able to find contact details and information on the Universitate website, as well as the YouTube links that will be sent to you, and you will also be able to contact the presenters, and we want to encourage you to work with them, and we really appreciate your attendance here. It was a wonderful afternoon we could really continue speaking even more and more. I've got lots of questions from my side, but it's not my role here. Thank you so much, and thank you for the technical team and their support as well. Please take care and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.